Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. So in this video, we're going to continue going over the College Algebra Practice Final Exam Review. And this is part 3 of that, where we're going to be going over numbers 21 through 30. So if you're not aware, I did split this exam into 4 parts because it is a little lengthy. So if you missed any parts or you want to jump ahead, I will actually link the other parts in the description. So I'll link parts 1, 2, and 4 in the description for your convenience. Also, because these videos are a little long, I will list the timestamps of each question in the description as well, along with the topic of the question. For instance, if question number 1 is a factoring problem, then I'll put question number 1, factoring, and then the timestamp. That way you can jump around to questions you really need help with. So with that being said, we're going to continue with this review and go to number 21. So for question number 21, it says solve the inequality, the absolute value of 5x minus 2 plus 6 less than or equal to 13. So I'm going to write this down real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down this inequality, and as you see, it's the absolute value of 5x minus 2 plus 6 less than or equal to 13. So we are dealing with kind of like a absolute value inequality. So what we're going to do first is we're going to try to isolate the 5x minus 2 to just be on one side and everything else on the other side. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is subtract 6 from both sides. So I'm going to do minus 6 on the left and minus 6 on the right. And when we do that, the 6's will cancel out on the left, and it'll leave us with the absolute value of 5x minus 2 less than or equal to 13 minus 6 is going to be 7. Alright, so now that we're here, when we're dealing with anything with absolute values, what we're going to do is split it up into a negative and positive version. We're going to split this up. So for our negative version, this is going to become, we're going to write what's inside the absolute value signs, which is 5x minus 2. So I'm going to write 5x minus 2. And when we split this up, what we're going to do is, because this is a negative version, we're going to make this become 5x minus 2 greater than or equal to, and then we're going to say negative 7. For our positive version, we're going to take what's in the inside of the absolute value sign, so we're going to write what it is, 5x minus 2, and then we're going to just leave what it is, which is less than or equal to positive 7. So as you see, what I did was I just switched the sign. So when it was negative, I flipped the sign, and then I changed 7 to be negative, and then I basically just copied for the positive version, I just basically copied what it was minus the absolute value signs. So if you look, we have 5x minus 2 greater than or equal to negative 7, and then we have 5x minus 2 less than or equal to 7. The one thing that remains consistent is that they both have 5x minus 2. So what we can do is rewrite this as kind of like a double-sided inequality. So we can rewrite this as negative 7, and then we're going to say less than or equal to 5x minus 2, and then less than or equal to 7. And when we do this, it just makes it really easy, especially since we're going to be converting this interval notation. It just makes it a little more easy to kind of comprehend. So when we have double-sided inequalities, remember the goal is, in this case, we're going to try to isolate the x to be in the middle. So what we're going to do is add 2 on all the sides. So we're going to do plus 2 here, plus 2 on the right, and plus 2 on the left. And when we do that, the 2's in the middle will cancel out. And it'll leave us with negative 7 plus 2 is going to be negative 5. We'll have less than or equal to 5x. And then less than or equal to 7 plus 2 is 9. So the next thing we have to do is, because there's a 5 in front of the x, we're just going to divide everything by 5. So we're going to divide by 5 here, by 5 here, and by 5 here. And when we do that, the 5's in the middle will cancel out. And negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 1, less than or equal to, that'll just stay x now, and less than or equal to, 9 divided by 5 is just going to be 9/5. And that completes the problem. Now they want us to convert it in interval notation, so we're going to write this in interval notation. So remember, when we convert this to interval notation, we're going to write our sign. This is a less than or equal to. So anytime you have less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, that translates to brackets in interval notation. So we're going to start off with a bracket. Then we're going to write our number, which is -1, right here, comma, our second number, 9/5. And then we're going to close it because once again, it's another less than or equal to sign. We're going to close it with a bracket. And basically our answer for number 21 is going to be -1 9/5, and that will be the solution. And the answer choice that matches up with what we have is answer choice A. So A is the answer to number 21. And now we're going to move on to number 22. Alright guys, so for number 22 it says find the equation of the parabola with vertex -2, -3 that is passing through the origin. So I'm going to write all this information down real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down everything. Things that stood out is that this parabola has a vertex of -2, -3, and it also passes through the origin. In other words, the origin, that coordinate represents 0, 0. So that's all the information that stuck out. Now, as a reminder, when we're finding the equation of parabola, we can use the vertex form of a parabola. And as a reminder, that's going to be y equal to a times x minus h squared, and then we're going to do plus k. H and k, they represent basically the vertex, and basically the only thing we need is a to kind of complete this. So what we're going to do is, to solve for a, we're going to plug in the point that they gave us, which was the origin, 0, 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y. We don't know what a is, and then I'm also going to plug in 0 for x because that's the other one, and I'm going to say minus the h is going to be -2, and then it's squared, and then our k is going to be -3. So when we solve for this, it'll be 0 equal to a 0 minus a -2. That's like saying 0 plus 2, so that will be basically 2 squared minus 3. 2 squared is 4, and 4 times a will become 4a, and I'll be left with -3. The next thing I can do is add 3 on both sides to solve for a. The 3 on the right will cancel out, and we'll be left with 3 equal to 4 times a. So the last thing we need to do to solve for a is just divide by 4 on both sides. 4's will cancel out here, and basically we'll be left with a equal to 3/4. Therefore, to complete our equation, the equation is going to be y equal to, we found a to be 3/4 times x. Our vertex is -2. Remember, when you plug it in, it's always going to be the opposite sign, so that would be plus 2 squared and then -3. And that will be the answer to number 22. Alright, and the answer choice that corresponds to what we got is answer choice B. So B will be the answer number 22, and now we're going to move on to number 23. Alright guys, so for number 23, it says the profit per unit, P of x, when manufacturing x units is given by the formula P of x equal to -20 times x squared plus 200x minus 0.0015. What is the maximum profit? What is the maximum possible profit per unit? So I'm going to write down all the information that we need real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down everything. So in this problem, they essentially want us to find the maximum profit. So when we're dealing with parabolas, because as you see we have negative 20x squared, that's basically a parabola of some sort. What we can do when we find the vertex, or basically, when they want us to maximize or minimize what the profit is, they basically want us to find what the vertex is. And as you see, our parabola, our equation is negative, which indicates it's concave down, which will give us a maximum. So in order to find what that maximum is, we're going to use our vertex formula. So for our vertex formula, remember, in order to find the x value of the vertex, it's going to be x equal to negative b all over 2 times a. So what we're first going to do is find what this is. So if we found x, remember, this represents our a, the middle coefficient represents the b, and technically this represents c, but we're not using c in this case. So when we plug this in, that's going to be a negative times 200 all over 2 times, our a is negative 20, so it's going to be negative 20. And when we simplify that, that'll be negative 200 divided by negative 40. And negative 200 divided by negative 40 will give us a positive 5. So in order to complete this, once we find what the x-coordinate of our vertex is, we're just going to plug in 5 into our p of x to find what the corresponding y-coordinate is. So we're going to find p of 5, which is just going to be negative 20 times 5, all that squared, plus 200 times 5 minus 0.0015. And then we're just going to evaluate that. So when we evaluate that, we get the answer being 499.9985. So basically, the maximum profit, right, max profit is going to equal to $499.9985, I guess you can say. And the answer choice that lines up with what we got is answer choice A. So A will be the answer to number 23. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 24. Alright guys, so for number 24 it says, describe the transform steps to obtain the graph of g of x equal to the square root of negative x minus 5 plus 3 from the graph of f of x equal to the square root of x. So I'm going to write down everything real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down kind of g of x, which is the square root of negative x minus 5 plus 3, and they basically wanted to describe how we got to g of x from f of x, which was originally the square root of x. So looking at this, if you look, firstly, because it's negative x minus 5, it's minus 5. So this represents that the equation shifted right by 5. Remember, the sign is always going to be opposite of what it is. So this, because it's minus 5, it really means it went right 5. So we're going to say shift right 5. Another thing that I noticed is that we have a negative in front of the x. So when this happens, when the negative is in front of the x, it means that there was a reflection across the y-axis. And lastly, I see that it says plus 3. And this means that it went up, shifted up by 3. So when we kind of piece it all together, we'll say the graph shifted right 5, my bad. And then it reflected across y-axis. And then lastly, it shifted up 3. So the answer choice that correlates to what we got is answer choice E. So E will be the answer to number 24. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 25. Okay guys, so for number 25 it says the graph of the function g of x has been obtained from the graph of f of x equal to the cube root of x by the following transform steps. Shifted left by 4, reflected around the x-axis, vertically stretched by a factor of 2, then down by 8. What is the value of g of negative 12? So I'm going to write down all this information real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down the information for number 25. So our original graph was basically the cube root of x, and basically g of x is a transformation of the graph that shifted left by 4, reflected across the x-axis, had a vertical stretch of 2, and shifted down by 8. And basically we kind of have to find an equation for this based off this information. So when we're formulating the equation of g of x, since it's shifted left by 4, that indicates that that will be translated to x, and then because it's left, that means it went negative to the negative side, so that will translate to x. Remember, it's always going to be the opposite of what we think, so it's going to be x plus 4. So the next thing is we're going to take what we have. The next thing it says is it reflected across the x-axis. So when there's an x-axis reflection, that's basically going to be a negative in front of what we have, which is x plus 4. So the next thing is we have a vertical stretch of 2. So whenever there's a vertical stretch, we're going to take what we have, and it's going to be now negative times 2 times the square root of x plus 4. And then lastly, it had shifted down by 8. So that would be, to finalize it, g of x is going to be equal to negative 2. And my bad, this is all supposed to be cube root. So this is going to be cube root of x plus 4. And then shift down is 8, so it's going to be minus 8. So that completes our g of x equation. Basically, g of x is equal to negative 2 times the cube root of x plus 4 minus 8. And they basically want us to evaluate g of negative 12. So g of negative 12 is going to be equal to negative 2 times the cube root of, we're going to put negative 12 plus 4 minus 8, which is going to be equal to negative 12 plus 4, that's going to be, we'll write the negative 2, and then times the cube root. Negative 12 plus 4 is negative 8, minus 8. And the cube root of negative 8 is actually going to be negative 2. So that will become negative 2 times a negative 2 minus 8. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, and 4 minus 8 is negative 4. So the answer to number 25 will be negative 4. And the answer choice that corresponds to what we got is answer choice D. So for number 25, the answer is D. So now we're going to move on to number 26. Alright guys, so for number 26, it says, according to the rational zeros theorem, which of the numbers listed below would not need to check if it is a rational solution of the following equation? So we have 14x to the fourth plus 18x cubed minus 401 x squared plus 15x minus 33 equals 0. So I'm going to write down this equation real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down this equation and basically it wants to identify which of the following is not going to be a possibility of one of the solutions of this equation. So when using rational zeros theorem, remember we're going to only focus on the coefficient, the leading coefficient, and the last term. So our leading coefficient is 14, and we're going to denote that as Q. And our last term is negative 33. And that will be our P. So the first thing we're going to do is for our P, as you see, it's negative 33. So what we're going to do is we're going to see factors, find factors of negative 33. And for negative 33, we know that 33 is a factor of 33, so we're going to say plus or minus 33, plus or minus 11, plus or minus 3, and lastly plus or minus 1. So those are all factors of 33, negative 33. And then we're going to do the same for our Q. Our Q is 14, so we're going to find everything that factors to be 14. So one would be plus or minus 14, plus or minus 7, plus or minus 2, and lastly plus or minus 1. Alright, so once we find all these factors, what we're going to do is see what P over Q is, which will be essentially our possible zeros of the equation. So what we're going to do is just divide all the P's that we found by all the Q's that we found. So that will be, the first thing we're going to focus on is the negative 33, and we're just going to divide that by all these numbers. So we'll do plus or minus 33 over 14. And we'll do plus or minus 33 over 7. This is going to be a long one, just warning you. Plus or minus 33 over 2. And then we have plus or minus 33 over 1. Okay, so now if we move on to 11, that will be plus or minus 11 over 14. Then we'll have plus or minus 11 over 7, plus or minus 11 over 2, and plus or minus 11 over 1. Now we're going to move on to 3, so that will be plus or minus 3 over 14, plus or minus 3 all over 7, plus or minus 3 all over 2, and plus or minus 3 all over 1. So now we're going to move on to our 1, so that will be plus or minus 1 over 14, plus or minus 1 over 7, plus or minus 1 over 2, and lastly plus or minus 1 over 1. Okay, so those are all our possible zeros. And basically they want us to identify which one of the answer choices is not a possibility. So we have plus or minus 33 over 14, plus or minus 33 over 7, 33 over 32, 33 over 1, 11 over 14, 11 over 7, 11 over 2, 11 over 1. All these numbers. So basically we're going to look at the answer choices to figure this out. So if we look at the answer choices, the first one, it says A, negative 11 over 2. So if you look right here, we have our 11 over 2, which it says plus or minus 11 over 2. And so basically negative 11 over 2 is included in that solution. For B, it says 1 over 14. If you look right here, we also do have plus or minus 1 over 14. So that's not it. For C, it says negative 11 over 7. So if you look, we do have a negative 11 over 7, which is right here. It's plus or minus 11 over 7. For D, it says 14. So if I look, we have 33 over 14, 33 over 7, 33 over 2, 33 over 1, 11 over 14. I keep looking, and I don't see any 14 over 1, plus or minus 14 over 1. So that is a possibility. And for E, it says negative 3 over 14. And then negative 3 over 14, we have plus or minus 3 over 14. So all of these are included except for 14, so D is going to be the answer to number 26. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 27. Alright guys, so for number 27, it says state the degree and the end behavior for p of x equal to negative 7 times x plus 5 squared times x cubed times x minus 8 times x squared plus 5. So I'm going to write down this equation real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down this equation, and basically it wants us to identify the degree and the end behavior of this equation. So to calculate the degree, I'm going to write degree down here. We're going to first find the degree. So what I'm going to do is we have negative 7 times x plus 5 squared. I'm going to circle that. We have times x cubed. I'm going to circle that. Then we have times x minus 8. They usually don't write that, but that technically has a degree of 1. So I'm going to circle that. And then we have x squared plus 5. There's nothing on the outside of our parenthesis, however it is x squared, which means the highest degree of this grouping is 2. So what we're going to do is add up everything that we've circled, which is going to be 2 plus 3 plus 1, and then plus 2. And when we do that, we get 2 plus 3 plus 1 plus 2. And that, 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 1 is 6, and 6 plus 2 is 8. So 8 will be the degree of p of x. So the next thing we have to identify is the end behavior. So as you see, our degree is 8. 8 is even, and remember when we're dealing with even functions, the end behavior is going to be in the same direction. So it's either going to be up, up, or down, down. So one thing that I noticed is that with all of these, we have a negative 7 right here in the beginning. So this is negative. There's nothing else that's negative in the inside, so these are all positive. It's positive x plus 5 squared times x positive x cubed times x positive x minus 8 times positive x squared plus 5. So because there's just one negative in this expression, it negates the whole thing. So because it negates the whole thing, the end behavior is going to be down, down. So that's going to be the answer to number, I believe it's 27, and the answer choice that correlates to what we got is answer choice B. So now we're going to move on to number 28. Alright guys, so for number 28, it says identify the vertical asymptotes of the graph of f of x equal to 3x plus 6 all over x plus 3 times 5x minus 1 times x plus 2. So I'm going to write down this equation real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down f of x, so we have f of x equal to 3x plus 6 all over x plus 3 times 5x minus 1 times 5x, not 5x, times x plus 2, my bad. And they want us to identify the vertical asymptotes of this f of x, so whenever we're finding the vertical asymptotes, what we're going to do is set the denominator equal to 0. So we're basically just going to set our denominator equal to 0, because remember in the denominator, we can't have anything to evaluate to 0. And since these numbers are in the denominator, whatever their values are, when they're set equal to 0, is going to give us an undefined value. So we're going to set our denominator equal to 0. So that will basically be x plus 3 times 5x minus 1 times x plus 2 equal to 0. Luckily, all these are factored, so we're just going to set all these factors equal to 0. So we're going to do x plus 3 equal to 0, 5x minus 1 equal to 0, and lastly we're going to do x plus 2 equal to 0. And so we're going to solve for x. So on this side, we're just going to subtract 3. The 3's will cancel out. And we'll get x equal to negative 3. For 5x minus 1 equal to 0, we're just going to add 1. The 1's will cancel out. And we'll be left with 5x equal to positive 1, and then we're going to divide by 5 on both sides. And when we divide by 5, the 5 will cancel out, and we'll get x equal to 1/5. And lastly, we have x plus 2 equals 0, so we're going to subtract 2 on both sides. So we're going to subtract 2 on both sides for this one. And when we do that, the 2's will cancel out, and it'll leave us with x equal to -2. So basically, we have vertical asymptotes. And remember, vertical asymptotes are going to be all in terms of x. So it's going to be at x equal to -3, x equal to -2, and x equal to 1/5. And that will be our answer for this question. And the answer choice that corresponds to what we got is answer choice A. So A is going to be the answer to number 28. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 29. Okay guys, so for number 29, it says pick the polynomial which best matches this graph based on the end behavior and the behavior of the x-intercepts. So I'm actually going to zoom in on this graph, and we're going to kind of look at this graph and see what's going on. So the first thing I want you to notice is that we're just going to see where the x-intercepts are first. So I actually see an x-intercept at x equals -4. I see 1 at x equals +1, and I see 1 at x equals +5. Another thing that I notice is that the end behavior of our graph is up, up, which indicates that our graph is some type of even function. So if you look at our first x-intercept, which is x equals -4, if you kind of look at that graph and the way it is, like the pattern of it, it kind of looks like a cubic function. So because it has a cubic tendency and it's crossing at x equals -4, we can say that the 0 of that is going to be possibly an x plus 4 cubed. Next, if we go to x equals 1, we see that when it crosses, it's basically a straight line. And what does a straight kind of sloping line remind us of? A linear function, right? So it has like a linear tendency as it crosses x equals 1. So we can say that's going to just be, as a factor, that would just be x minus 1. And then lastly, we have our x equals 5. As you see, if you look at the tendency as it crosses, or in this case, it's bouncing off -5. Usually when it bounces, it indicates it has like an even tendency at that point. So we can say it kind of looks like a parabola, so we can say that's x minus 5 squared because it bounces. Remember, if something has an odd tendency, it's usually going to cross, such as at are -4 and 1, and when it has an even tendency, such as at x equals 5, it's going to bounce. So because it's up, up, we know the degrees of all these are going to have to add up to an even degree. So our best bet is that we're going to have x plus 4 cubed times x minus 1, and then times x minus 5 squared. So as you see, this is kind of our best bet. And when we add these up, remember our goal is to have a degree that's even. And 3 plus 1 plus 2, 3 plus 1 is 4, and 4 plus 2 is 6. So basically, this is the answer. This will be the best kind of, I guess, prediction of what type of function this graph is. And the answer choice that best matches with ours is answer choice C. So answer choice C would be the answer number 29. So now we're going to move on to number 30, which is the last question that we're going to go over in part 3. Alright, so for number 30, it says identify the horizontal asymptotes if any of the function f of x equal to 7 minus 4x plus 3x cubed all over 3x plus 4x cubed. So I'm going to write down f of x real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down our f of x, and it basically wants us to identify what the horizontal asymptote of the function is. So remember, when we're dealing with horizontal asymptotes, there's actually a set of rules that we follow, and these rules are based on the highest degree of the top and bottom of the function. So in this case, when we see at our top we have 7 minus 4x plus 3x cubed. So this indicates that the highest degree of our top function is 3. And for our bottom function, we just have 3x plus 4x cubed. So once again, in the bottom, our highest degree is 3 as well. So when this happens, when the highest degree of the top and bottom are equal to each other, what we're going to do is just divide the coefficients in front of those degrees. So in this case, we're going to do 3 divided by 4. And basically, our horizontal asymptote it's always in terms of y, remember that. But our horizontal asymptote is basically going to be 3 over 4. And that concludes that question. Alright, so the horizontal asymptote is at y equals 3/4. And the answer choice that matches up with what we got is answer choice D. So D will be the answer to number 30. But that pretty much wraps up this part. There's one more part left, and I will also have that linked in the description. If you missed a part, I will have parts 1 and 2 linked in the description as well. But I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions and you need some clarification on some questions I went over, please leave them in the comments below. But that's pretty much everything, guys, and take care.